But big news this week, we're hearing an update on Luigi Mangione. If you don't remember, he's the man who's accused of shooting and killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. This happened in December of last year, leading to a days-long manhunt. And now we're continuing to get those updates and figure out what happened behind the scenes. I do want to put this up on your screen as well. This is a tweet that we have there from TMZ, and we're learning a bit more as Luigi Mangione reportedly mapped out his thought process before killing United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. He did this in a journal that was found on his person during his detainment. Big news that we want to now dive a bit deeper into. Want to bring into the conversation legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal. Jeremy, thanks for being with us here on Live Now. We've been talking over the last few months about Luigi Mangione, some of these updates that we've seen in this case. Now this latest news, there was a journal on him when he was detained detailing what some folks are calling a manifesto there in his plot to kill Brian Thompson.
This is very disturbing stuff, and it feeds really right into the government's hands here. The government's theory being that he is deranged, that he is intentional, that he was crossing state lines to commit this murder. All of it feeds into the capital murder statute. And not only that, it really also kind of talks about sort of his overarching political theories that he wanted to sort of spark an uprising, if you will, that he wanted to that he wanted to make a broader point, which sort of goes again to a lot of the government's theories of terrorism, and it really again just kind of feeds into their argument that this is what makes this a capital offense. Murder is a very complicated statute. There's murder and there's murder. People die all the time at the hands of another, but it's always going to be based on the intent. It's always going to be based on the culpability. And when you have culpability that is so high, that's intentional, that's trying to incite some mass chaos, that's when in the eyes of the federal law, it turns capital. And that's exactly what the government's going to rely on to try to get the death penalty here.
And that truly is the significance of this case, putting up some video that we have there from when Luigi Mangione was brought back to New York City. Of course, he was found and arrested a few states away. I want to talk about and quote what he had there in the journal. He says, quote, "So you say you want to rebel against the deadly greed-fueled health insurance cartel. Do you bomb the HQ? No, bombs equal terrorism." This is allegedly what Mangione wrote. This was in that notebook that they found when he was arrested 5 days later. The words, though, we've been talking about the intent behind the Capitol murder. How significant are his words saying stuff like terrorism, talking about bombs, and saying the words rebel? Is it going to really, really stick out for those jurors if this eventually goes to trial?
It makes defending this case exceptionally hard. When you look at Luigi Mangione's case, if you're a defense lawyer, if you're defending this, you clear the table and you kind of ask yourself, okay, what do we have here, right? Well, you don't have, it's not me, because we're on videotape, and they found 8 million piles of evidence on him. So you don't have that defense going. You don't have the government screwed this up. You may have a little bit of that. But these are the best of the best as far as federal and state prosecutors that are going after him. And even if they got something wrong, they're not going to get much wrong. They're contesting a lot of the search and seizure at the McDonald's. I don't know that you necessarily hang your hat entirely on that. So that's not really an option. What you have left is not guilty by reason of insanity. But to do that, you have to show that even if you were insane, even if you didn't understand what was going on, that you still understood the difference between right and wrong. And the journal, the manifesto, he clearly is, in some instances, unhinged, to be sure, but he clearly understands the depth of what he's doing, and he understands what he is doing is wrong. If I'm defending the case, what I do based on this manifesto is I just have to separate him as far as I can from this to say, listen, he's changed. He had a psychotic break. People 6 months from the date of his arrest didn't recognize him, didn't understand him. He lost contact with his family members. So you can kind of say, look, this was the unhinged this was the out of bounds. This was the mentally ill Luigi Mangione that wrote this manifesto, but he's better now. Unfortunately, that's what's called a mitigation argument, meaning it just says, don't execute me. But if they lose that in trial, he's still looking at life in federal prison. So this absolutely makes it really, really difficult for his defense team in every way.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to also put up this post that we have there from the New York Post saying that Luigi Mangione's manifesto revealed, as we're talking about some of the stuff, but also a failed plot for mass casualty event. Jeremy, I found this extremely interesting. So in that same notebook that the prosecutors behind this case are alleging is the manifesto that proves that Luigi Mangione pre-planned his attack on the United Healthcare CEO. He also expressed relief that he had not followed up on an atrocity that could have been a mass casualty event. He said in MD, he said, I'm glad that in a way I procrastinated because it would have allowed me to learn more about UHC. He said it would have been an unjustified catastrophe that would have been perceived mostly as sick, but more importantly, unhelpful. He also talked about innocents would have been killed as well. But they're trying to say that this would have happened in his native Maryland. Not a lot of clues, though, as to what that event even potentially was. But now that they have this notebook, could more charges be filed, being that he could have potentially pre-planned a mass terror attack as well?
I don't know about that, Christina. That's a great question, because a lot of the things that you're talking about could certainly be more charges if, for argument's sake, he got further and further down the path of making some of those other plans come true. If he took actual steps to do those, then he could be charged with some other type of thing, or if there was anybody else in on it with him, it could be a conspiracy. But what makes me think that probably it's not is that I think they've had this manifesto, this diary, they've had it for a minute now. They've had it for at least 5 or 6 months. And I think they just are now sort of slow rolling some of these things out there to in the courtroom and to the media. So I think we would have seen by now any additional charges. Then again, maybe there's some additional things that are being investigated. And you have to question this was a very elaborate plot, and tragically for Brian Thompson, a successful plot. But you have to question yourself and wonder how, if one man who is clearly sort of detached from reality, if one man can in fact really be responsible for whatever it is in his mind he had planned. We would certainly hope not, and tragically, I think we've seen the answer all too many times that it's not. But to answer your question, I don't know that we'll necessarily see additional charges, but you better believe the government feels like it's in the best interest of justice to charge him with anything and everything that they possibly and conceivably can. You've got the federal government that is trying to execute him, and then you've got New York State on top of that still wants a life conviction. Everybody's getting in line to pound on Luigi Mangione. It's simply good politics if you're an elected official.
And we're, again, continuing to see that. Thanks for breaking that down, Jeremy. That was just one of the questions that I had. Before I let you go, I want to bring this up as well. Another interesting piece that came out of this notebook. Mangione praised and also did cite some criticism of the Unabomber. He said, for example, he makes some good points on the future of humanity, but to make his point, he indiscriminately did mail bombs to innocents. That's interesting that he's bringing yet another person who was known for their terror attacks into it. It sort of shows how these copycats can be born from acts of terrorism.
That's exactly what the FBI is afraid of here, are copycat folks. And he invoked Michael Moore's name in there, who very, very quickly distanced himself from Mangione, saying, hey, nothing to see here. I disavow anything and everything that this guy is, any praise that this guy is bringing my way. It just, again, to kind of go back to the beginning of it, this is really tailor-made for the government's case, and it fits exactly within their theory. Now, at the end of the case, what has to happen, though, is the jury has to buy into it. And I think the jury can go a long way with this. To find Luigi Mangione guilty. It's hard to see any avenues, any realistic avenues for acquittal. But the real fight in this case is whether or not a jury will send Luigi Mangione to death. And that is still really a far stretch. And I don't know that this manifesto gets them there because, again, the defense can always come back and say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, this is exhibit A of how mentally ill this man is. And as much as capital punishment, as much as the new administration has wanted to be more aggressive with it, the jurors still have to be there with it. And it's very difficult, I think, in the 21st century to ask somebody with mental health issues that they be executed. It's very hard to get jurors to take that leap.
And it'll certainly be interesting as we're continuing to wait to watch it all unfold, getting fed these bits and pieces of information leading up to ultimately the day we'll see Luigi Mangione in court, putting back up some of this video footage there. And again, Jeremy Rosenthal, our legal analyst, helping us to break it down. Jeremy, any final thoughts?
As you can see here from the clip, it's really good politics to go after this guy. That's what the defense has been kind of complaining about here, that they're kind of ganging up on this. But this is a very high profile case. The government definitely wants to make their point. And whether they like it or not, or whether they know it or not, they're really giving, in many ways, Luigi Mangione the microphone that he wants. He can talk about the healthcare system, and we're listening to his thoughts about the healthcare system, about greed, about corporate issues, about how broken our healthcare system is. So it's a double-edged sword when we see 80 people walking him down the pier, including Mayor Eric Adams, who knows a thing or two about federal court. When we see all these people getting in line to pounce on him, they always have to remember the flip side of it, which is, in some ways, you're kind of giving this guy what he wants.
All right, again, legal analyst Jeremy Rosenthal leaving you with this final statement there from the alleged manifesto, the words from Luigi Mangione allegedly in that notebook saying, "I do apologize for any strife or trauma, but it had to be done. Frankly, these parasites simply had it coming." It'll be interesting to see how all of this plays out. We appreciate you, as always, for joining us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you, Christine.